Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing well. Well, interesting weather we're having lately.
Yeah, here we are in April. We had days that were 50. I think we got up to 60 over the previous weekend. And right now currently we're doing this show on April 2nd. And as an April Fool's joke, we are under at least 4 inches of snow with maybe more than a foot to come over the weekend.
It is wet, heavy snow.
It is.
And yeah, if we get this the whole batch of snow, there's going to be a lot of snow.
Is having a wet snow, the temperatures are going to stay around 30 plus. Is having a wet snow, are there any benefits to it at this time of the year? Does it add moisture to the ground?
It sure does. Now, before we got this snow, the soil was starting to thaw out for much of us across the region. I actually tried putting a shovel down into the ground. I was able to get it down, well, at least my place in South Fargo, maybe about 8 inches or so.
Okay.
So that leaves some thawed soil where the moisture can go down in. So that's encouraging. If the ground was solidly frozen all around the area, then of course it's all going to run off. So I'm encouraged that some of this is going to go down in, and it seems like we can always use the moisture.
Do you have any concerns about getting such a wet, heavy snow? I was wondering today, if it's, on branches, because it's just going to be so heavy, do you think it'll lead to some breaks? But we're not supposed to see a lot of wind, which should be another factor.
Right, because like you mentioned, John, if we get that wet, heavy snow that clings to some branches, then you get wind with it, then all of a sudden you got the wind whipping these heavy laden branches, and all of a sudden you got power lines and branches and everything crashing down. But like you say, it's coming down so far anyway, pretty mild, coming down straight. But of course, so it weighs heavily on evergreens, because it just clings on to those, especially some of the things like arborvitae, the soft foliage type things, maybe some junipers. And so it can, if it gets heavy enough, it can physically break them down. What I like to do if on an evergreen, if it looks like it's kind of weighting down those branches, I like to go out and just gently kind of brush it off. First, it has to be careful because sometimes you can do more damage. If you try to whack that snow off, you can just yourself structurally break the branch down. So I like on arborvitae, if I've got a little arborvitae that I feel sorry for that's getting laden down, I'll put one hand under the foliage and another on top and kind of gently scoop the snow off. So sometimes I have done that because it is conceivable that we could get some branch breakage. On the deciduous type of trees and shrubs, it seems like so far, knock on wood, that they aren't getting weighted down as much.
How about things that are starting to emerge from the ground?
My tulips.
Tulips,
yeah,
crocus,
I got some tulips
things like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Of course, on the south side of a structure, when we get sunshine, things oftentimes come up earlier than kind of they're meant to. But I've got tulips out in one of the perennial beds that's away from the house, and they were up a couple inches, and they are used to coming up through cold, chilly soil. So even if we get snow on top or some cold temperatures, they're used to it. So this snow isn't going to damage them at all. They aren't up far enough to where they're going to get kind of structurally damaged. And so the snow always gives a little insulation. So I'm not really worried about damage on the perennials or anything. Now, if we were going to get sub-zero temperatures right after this, the snow would actually be some benefit. It's interesting how, of course, in the orange groves in different areas, when they're trying to protect from a freeze, they'll turn on the sprinklers, and sometimes the citrus trees will be covered with ice, and they'll be fine. Because ice, it sounds kind of weird, but the ice actually provides an insulation effect.
Oh.
And so, it's interesting. We experienced that same thing when we had our garden center. We had a beautiful April, and our trees and shrubs were in full leaf. And then in May, it was maybe about May 10th or 12th, we were going to have a hard freeze. And so I thought, well, if it's good enough for the citrus growers, should be good enough for us. So I turned the sprinklers on, let them run during the night. And the next morning, the trees and shrubs were just coated in ice because they were in full leaf already because it had been warm. And sure enough, when it melted, they were fine.
Okay.
So this snow that we're getting, even if the temperature kind of drops and freezes this wet, heavy stuff, it does provide some insulation. So I'd rather it be nice and sunny.
Yeah.
But the snow, it'll give moisture. And it's not in big drifts yet. It sounds like the snow is across a fairly wide range of our North Dakota, South Dakota into Minnesota. So, yeah, the glass is half full, I guess. We're getting some moisture.
Yeah, we're looking at Easter in a couple of days, and it's just you used to thinking more along lines of a real spring, like the weather we had been having. But, speaking of kind of holidays or celebrations, I got to thinking, next year, maybe we should do a March Madness. We should do our own March Madness, a bracket of plants. We'll figure out, and we'll figure out a way for our listeners to vote on what would be their favorite plant, or as we could say, the goat of the garden, the greatest of all time in the garden. Whether we do this as indoor plants, outdoor plants, if we break them up into different categories. But I think that could be kind of a fun thing for us to do through March.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
March Madness gardening style.
Yes, exactly. Get people to weigh in on what things that they like and can't live without in their garden. I think that would be quite fun.
I think that'd be great. Yeah. We can have awards and yes. Name the winners.
Yeah,
I like that.
I think that would be exactly. People can we could do pools. People can register their name and maybe we'll give them some gardening swag. We won't have any money, but we can give them some garden swag or something like that.
Yeah, I love it. And with as quickly as time goes, next March will be here before we know it.
That's right. Well, like we were saying, we're a couple days out from Easter, so we're going to talk about some Easter plants today, Easter lilies, some of the other plants associated with that. But first, you've got a question from a listener. You've got a letter from a listener.
I do. And of course, John, before I get to the letter, it reminds me, Good Friday here, potato planting day.
That's right.
For many people, Good Friday is a day to plant potatoes. Boy, we'd have to brush aside a fair amount of snow in order to get those potatoes.
It would be a little messier
get those
than
potatoes
normal.
planted. So I may not make Good Friday for potato planting. Usually I don't. I wait until later. Well, anyway, yes, on to the letter. Kim and Joel wrote in and said, "Hi, I hope this finds you well and enjoying the teaser warm weather." That was before we got the snow, obviously. And they go on, "We're faithful followers of your podcast. Keep up the good work. It's great to have a space for more dedicated conversation about gardening in the northern latitudes. One of the topics you've included in your podcast discussion has been amaryllis, using them in outdoor plantings. I figured it wouldn't hurt to reach out to you and offer you a bunch of the amaryllis that I currently have."
Okay.
Gosh, that's awesome.
That's
We're always open to free plants. Well, anyway, the reason I wanted to read this letter, and I'll go on here, is they give their detailed method of producing these amaryllis.
Okay.
And so since many people probably bought amaryllis around the Christmas time, and they're maybe wondering what to do with these amaryllis, here, Kim and Joel give their recipe. Okay, so here it is. "I received the original bulb as a holiday gift many years ago, and of course could not just toss the plant after blooming. So I continued to divide and repot the bulbs over the years. My typical method of care is to keep the pots outside in mottled sunshade through the summer. As the fall closes in and a hard freeze looms, I repot each bulb, trimming back the growth, separating new bulbs from the older bulbs, repotting each one into its own fresh soil. I give them a good watering and then put them under the steps in our cool garage. It's heated so it never freezes, but it's cool. After the holidays are over and sometime in early to mid-January, I pull the pots out, give them another good water, place in a sunny window in the house. By about Valentine's Day each year, we have a beautiful display of these amazing flowers. For this year, all have bloomed and will be returning to their summer location outside. Attached is a picture of the bulbs in full bloom. So awesome. Thank you, Kim and Joel.
That's great.
Very much. That's awesome. And I love your description of the method that you use. So you just keep them growing and then give them a rest in a cool spot, bring them out again. And one of the keys, as they mentioned here, one of the keys is to give them a summer vacation outdoors. What that does is, under the good light and the good care, maybe give them some fertilizer too, they produce a wonderful bulb with a flower bud down inside that's just waiting to happen. So I really appreciate your sharing with us your method. So again, thank you, Kim and Joel, very much for writing.
That is great. It's great to think of that kind of color, to have that, especially in late January, February, like they were saying, like around Valentine's Day, to have those bursts of really vibrant reds or whites or pinks, whatever different colors that they've got.
It is, and I believe they indicated starting from one bulb, and now I believe did they mention they have 10 pots or so? Okay. So their one bulb turned into lots more.
Well, that's great.
So I like the idea that they separated out the little bulbs that form around the sides. And so, great. Thanks again for giving us a good recipe for what to do with our own amaryllis bulbs.
That's great. And well, from one holiday to the other, let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about Easter lilies.
Local news affects your life. It gives you the confidence and clarity to make better decisions every day. You can support that with a digital subscription. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to take advantage of our introductory offer, just $6 for 6 months.
All right, we're back this week, and we're talking about Easter plants. We tend to think of Easter and springtime and greenery coming up, but Easter lilies are really kind of one of the, I would say, probably the most associated plants along with the holiday, isn't it? Would you say so?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I just love the smell, the fragrance of an Easter lily.
It's very divisive, though. There are some people who do not like the lily smell.
That's a good point.
It's a very powerful.
It is powerful.
Yeah.
It is. And so it's interesting. The Easter lily has a fascinating history, and it hasn't always been associated with Easter. Now, of course, the lily has been associated with various religions over time and over history. And so anyway, it's kind of interesting, the connection. Okay, so there's kind of the biblical and, historical religion association of lilies as a rule. So anyway, the lily that we now term as the Easter lily had its origin in Japan. It was native to some of the southern islands in Japan. And then in the 1700s, a Swedish botanist, as he was kind of going around checking out plants around the world, spotted this lily growing native on these Japanese islands. And he thought, well, gosh, that's really neat. So then he took it back to Europe. And of course, in the 19th century, it became very popular. And pretty soon it started kind of the connection. Well, gosh, this is much like the lily in religious circles. And so pretty soon it developed that kind of association. And because where it was native, it would tend to bloom in spring. So then came the association with Easter. So to produce more of these beautiful lilies, for those that wanted them, they began growing them in Bermuda. They took them to Bermuda because I guess that's a wonderful spot to grow some plants and propagate them. So Bermuda became the spot to produce these wonderful lilies. But a virus got into the entire Bermuda lily crop and wiped them out. So then it was back to Japan to produce them. But then in World War I, shipping lanes were interrupted, and so that cut off the supply of Easter lilies. Well, a World War I soldier, packed a bunch of these lily bulbs in a suitcase because he thought, gosh, these are really cool. He must have an interest in gardening. And so he packed them in a suitcase and kind of smuggled them to his home on the West Coast in the United States. And the West Coast, Washington, Oregon area, the climate there, the humidity and the pleasant climate became an area where you could grow Easter lilies. And so production started there. And then, especially after World War II, when the Japanese market, or during World War II, when the Japanese market was totally cut off, one of the only areas where you could get these lily bulbs was in the Western United States. So all of a sudden, about 1,000 growers started growing these Easter lilies. In fact, it was called the White Gold Rush, because all of a sudden these beautiful lilies, which were in demand for Easter, they were so in demand that about 1,000 producers were all cashing in and producing these lilies that then in turn would go to greenhouses all around the world to produce them in time for Easter. And that area stuck. Now, there's no longer 1,000 growers. There's probably 10 growers of Easter lily bulbs that account for about 90% of the world's supply. So that's where most of our Easter lilies come from. So now, when they produce these bulbs out there, these wholesalers produce the bulb, and then the bulbs go to regional greenhouses that produce these. And I know there were some in the Fargo area, there were some greenhouses that used to pot up, and I believe there still are, that pot up the bulbs and time them especially for Easter, right before Easter. So now just think of it. These lilies don't bloom a long, long time. They don't bloom for months. There's a fairly short window of when they come into bud and bloom. And Easter varies from year to year. And so I very much respect greenhouse growers who grow a crop of Easter lilies. Because as I recall, they count of course, the temperature has to be just so. The warmer temperature is going to speed them along. Too cold, they'll be slow. And an Easter lily isn't worth anything if it's still in bud the Monday after Easter. It's got to be blooming ahead. So the timing is perfect. So I remember some of the growers who produced Easter lilies. We never did in our greenhouse. But for those that produced Easter lilies, they count the number of leaves and they do a specific timing and a temperature regimen so that these will start budding at the appropriate time before Easter. So probably a week before Easter or before, so that they're setting buds, because you want a few of the blooms to be open when people are going to be buying them.
Yep.
Like maybe a week before Easter, or a few days before Easter. And yet you don't want all the blossoms to be open, or, because somebody wants some that'll still be in bud. So just think of the precision timing. So now when we look at an Easter lily, when we go to buy them, and there's some nice blooms open, there's some buds yet, I have a great respect for whoever produced and timed that crop so precisely that we can enjoy them.
I didn't realize that, there's that much work. I mean, obviously, anytime that you've got a crop like that, there's a lot of work, but just to getting the timing right.
Sure. Christmas falls on December 25th every year.
Right.
But Easter varies, and so they really have to watch pretty closely for that timing. Otherwise, they could be in hot water. So it's...
I was going to say, it's interesting because you talked about this a little bit, that the lily and the association with different religions, and I do know if there's a difference between the Easter lily and is it the peace lily that a lot of times is used at funerals or given?
Yes, yeah.
How similar? I mean, it's the same. They're the same family there, but
So the peace lily that we grow as a house plant. That has a fibrous type root.
Okay.
And so different species. The Easter lily is a true bulb, more like an onion, a true bulb. So it's growing underground from that big, thick onion-like bulb. And so, different. But, it's interesting. They share that same lily name, of course. And so it is fascinating. Botanically, there's nothing there's nothing that botanically was classified as an Easter lily. It's Lilium longiflorum. But because it became associated with Easter, then we give it the common name of Easter lily. But the botanists, of course, will go by the Latinized name of that. So it's fascinating, a fascinating plant. And of course, when we go to buy them, weather's kind of chilly right now. It's kind of a chilly Easter. So Mary and I have not bought our Easter lily yet. Since today's Thursday, we better get cracking and go get our Easter lily. Now, because it's so chilly, these are tropical type lilies. And so we need to protect them when we buy them from the store out to your vehicle. If it's under 40 degrees, they should be covered.
Okay.
So the florists, when you go to a florist or flower shop to buy one, they're going to enclose it.
Yep.
When we buy them at grocery stores or mass merchandisers, they don't always provide covering. So I'm kind of anticipating that when we go to buy ours, it's going to be under 40 degrees. So sometimes I will take along a garbage bag if I do buy one at a mass merchandiser's. I'll take along a garbage bag so I can enclose it in that. Or when we buy them from a flower shop, then they will usually have bags large enough to enclose it. And of course, once we get them home, it's important to give them a little bit of light, but sometimes it's fun to put them on the middle of a table or a coffee table so they don't need to immediately be in sunshine. Now, Mary, when Mary and I met, she worked at a flower shop. So she was well trained in things like Easter lilies. So there's two things that Mary always does when we get our Easter lily home. And that is, first of all, to poke a hole in the decorative foil. Because otherwise, when you water it, it's going to just set in a swamp in
just
there.
Like a poinsettia.
Exactly. And so she'll cut a hole in the bottom, and then we'll set it in a drainage dish. The other thing that she does, and that florists do, is as soon as the white blossoms open, she removes the yellow anthers. Those are the structures that have the pollen. And of course, whenever I do that, then of course I get my thumbs and fingers are all full of yellow pollen. If you don't remove those, as soon as the flower opens, the pollination occurs, and that's a trigger for the flower to start just withering away. It's accomplished its pollination type thing. But if you remove those anthers, the yellow part, right away, just pinch them off or cut them off, then the flower thinks, oh gosh, I got to keep it going here. And so it'll stay blooming and fresh longer.
So it's a good way to prolong the bloom.
Exactly. Prolongs the bloom. And then also you don't get the yellow pollen dropping on a white tablecloth either.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course, water them as you would a house plant. You can let the surface of the soil dry a little bit, but don't let them get dry to the point of wilting, of course, because they might not recover. But then when you do apply some water, put enough so the little bit drains out the bottom, and they'll keep blooming quite a while. I always like to choose some that have a couple open blossoms, but then also some that have a number of buds yet to open. And there's a big difference in price. Some of the bargain Easter lilies might not have nearly as many buds, but those from a flower shop that might be a little more expensive, but probably well worth it. If you count the number of buds that are on the plant already, it's not going to produce new buds. New buds aren't going to form. They've got to already be in place. They might be tight and a little smaller, but as long as those flower buds are already in place, they're going to continue to open on up.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Let's take a quick little break. We can come back. Some more other Easter plants, some other plants associated with the holiday.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
Okay, we're back, and this week we're talking about plants associated with Easter, and we're talking about the Easter lily, and another one with Easter in the name is the Easter cactus. And there's also a Christmas cactus and a Thanksgiving cactus. How different is the Easter cactus from those other two?
Yeah, so the Easter cactus joins its cousins. Sometimes you'll see this series of three called generically holiday cactus. And it's interesting. The reason they got associated with these three holidays is because it's generally how or when they bloom. There are three distinct species of cactus. And what triggers the blossom on these holiday cactus is a combination of day length and temperature. So it's kind of a complex interplay. So typically they bloom in fall, winter, and early spring because that's when the day length is shorter. So they don't typically bloom in the middle of summer because that's when the days are long. So all three of these cacti are called epiphytes. That means they live on dead trees.
Okay.
They kind of root down into the, in the crevices of trees, the rotting type stuff. Maybe there's old leaf debris down in the crotch of a tree, and so it kind of makes its own compost, and then these cacti get started there. So they aren't desert type cacti. They're tropical, and so that makes a big difference. They don't like to totally dry out, such as a barrel type cacti might. And so anyway, these three vary a little bit as to when they start blooming. So the one that is triggered the easiest is the Thanksgiving cactus. Okay, so that about the time that typically we think of Thanksgiving, the day length and stuff triggers that, and temperatures. And of course, indoors, any of these three cacti, if it's too warm at night especially, they usually won't bloom.
Okay.
But that's why many of our grandparents and great-grandparents maybe had them in a good room up at the front of the house that got kind of chilly because you didn't use that room very often. So it maybe got chilly enough at night that they consistently got triggered to bloom in the late fall or winter. And so the Christmas cactus is kind of the in-between one, gets triggered usually kind of around the December time. The Easter lily cactus is the Easter cactus is the most finicky of those. So that one has to have a little more of this or that or the other thing, and then it starts blooming more towards Easter. Now, none of these three watch the calendar that close.
Right.
So, I mean, if one of these cacti blooms kind of out of season, it doesn't mean that the planets are not in line or anything like that. It just means that these cacti are kind of watching the day length. That could be interrupted by lights in your house. Maybe the temperature in your house is varying a little bit. Maybe they're closer to a window that has a cooler microclimate. So sometimes a Christmas cactus might end up blooming more towards Easter.
Okay.
But if you look at these three, the Thanksgiving cacti has prongs where the little joints, where the stem joints join, there are prongs. Okay, that's Thanksgiving cactus. The Christmas cactus has smooth pads. There are no prongs where the little joints are. The Easter cactus also has smooth pads, but at the junction of those stem pads, there are little tiny hair-like, kind of tan hair-like things. You have to look kind of close to see those little almost brush-like little objects. And the blossom on an Easter cactus is more star-shaped than the other. Yeah, it's a little more of a star shape. In fact, there's nothing like show and tell on a podcast, is there? But here, there's a picture of the Easter cactus blossom, and they're a little more kind of open star shape. So a different blossom on that. The Easter cactus is not as popular. It isn't sold as often as the other type of holiday cacti, the Thanksgiving and the Christmas cactus. And of course, in addition to those, lots of other good plants sold around Easter time, tulips, anything that kind of just generates a springtime feel. It seems Easter is a kickoff. So tulips are always great additions.
You can get great variety of color.
Yeah, definitely.
Tulips,
daffodils, sunny daffodils. Miniature roses are sometimes started to sell this time of year. Hyacinths. I love the smell. Do you like the smell of hyacinths?
I don't think I know it.
Yeah, that's it's one of the spring type bulbs. You plant them in the bulb in the fall from bulbs, but of course they're forced in pots this time of year, so you see them in florists. And the hyacinth is one of the most fragrant. Again, it probably depends who you ask, because they do have a strong fragrance. And so hyacinths are beautiful. Hydrangeas, the potted type hydrangeas. Now, the florist hydrangeas that are blue, pink, and purple generally are not adapted for most of North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. The florist type hydrangea, the potted ones, are a different species. Not as well adapted to our area for outdoor planting. I mean, it never hurts to try. If you want to try planting it out, never hurts to try. Let's see, another beautiful one, azalea. Azaleas are a beautiful potted plant. They can be kept growing indoors from year to year. These are not, the florist azalea is not the hardy outdoor shrub type azalea that can be grown in our area. But azalea, they're a little fussy. My great uncle had a great success with azalea indoors. He wanted to prove that you could get it to rebloom again. Okay. And he did. It worked. And again, some of these things, can you rebloom them? Well, you've got nothing to lose by trying. Right. And so some of these things are fun. So it's interesting at florists this time of year. In addition to the traditional Easter lily, you've got all these other colorful ones also. I should mention, John, before we wrap it up, the Easter lily can be planted outside. Okay. Now, Easter lily, Lilium longiflorum, is about a zone 5 lily. And so very borderline in hardiness. But sometimes it's a shame you've got this Easter lily, and it's fun to try planting them outside, because I've had success, and many other gardeners in our area have had success planting them out and getting them to come back another year. And of course, they're very beautiful. But because they're zone 5, and we're mostly zone 4, and the northern areas are zone 3, they need winter protection. So here's what you do if you want to try it. Okay. And that is, after your Easter lily has faded, keep watering it as you would a houseplant, put it in a sunny window, and just keep watering it. And at a certain point here in late spring, it's going to kind of turn yellowish and brownish, but that's fine. And then plant it outdoors, take it out of the pot, plant it outdoors about 6 inches deep. It will start growing again. It'll send up a whole new stalk. And the first summer here, it'll bloom in September. It'll bloom again in September, because you see it's been a little confused being in and out of a pot and being forced in a greenhouse. And then mulch it heavily in the fall with, I'd put a couple of feet of mulch over it, leaves, straw, something like that. And then the next spring, uncover it. And it will bloom at normal lily blooming time, which in our area is July. Okay. That's when lilies, the more hardy lily types, start blooming in July. But each year I get photos from people who said, look at my Easter lily. It bloomed. Sometimes that'll be in September, and occasionally I have seen some. They can get quite tall. They can get 4 feet tall and be quite dramatic. Some of the newer varieties of Easter lily are a little shorter. They've kind of got cultivars of Easter lilies, might be a little shorter. Sometimes they use some growth regulator because, we don't want a 5-foot potted lily in our house. And but outdoors, they can get, 3, 4, 5 feet tall if they winter enough.
And so if you plant yours outdoors, when it does come up and it does produce the flower and the flower opens up, do you still want to go in there? You don't want to pull the yellow, what do you call those out?
Yeah, the anthers.
The anthers.
Yep, the pollen
you want to leave
anthers.
those in, right? Just if you're gonna leave them.
The
outdoors?
only reason that you would need to leave those in would be if you wanted to get it to produce seed. Okay. If you thought, well, gosh, it'd be fun to do some breeding on lilies, cross them with something. But actually, outdoors, even the flowers would last longer if you do remove those anthers as soon as the flowers opened.
Okay.
You wouldn't have to, but so it's fun. I always suggest that people who enjoy gardening and like plants try getting a poinsettia to bloom another year.
Yeah.
Save it, get it to bloom. And I also suggest people, if you want to try something, save your Easter lily, plant it out, see if it'll bloom that same summer, September, and winter it over. And get, poinsettias, I've enjoyed doing that. I don't do it every year because it requires a little bit of extra thing, and I kind of devote some of that time to other gardening. But it's fun to say that, yes, I did that. You can check it off your bucket list. And so for anyone that's wondering, the other thing I get kind of a kick out of too, occasionally churches will, after Easter, they'll put the Easter lilies out after they've faded. They'll sometimes put them out on a table by the entryway and say, take it if you'd want them. And so if someone's really in the mood for Easter lilies, you might even check churches after the lilies have faded, and they no longer have them in church. So before they get to the garbage bin, you might be able to intercept.
All right. Well, if people have questions about more questions about what to do with their Easter lily, or if they want to show off that they've been able to keep one for a year, and they want to send in pictures of that, or they want to talk about Easter cactus or any plants or anything that they have questions about, what's the best way to reach you?
Yes, send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. And I would love to hear from somebody about your experience with overwintering Easter lilies.
All right. Don, thanks again for coming in today.
Thank you much, John. Happy Easter, and happy Easter to all.